take me back to my boots and saddle. Ooh.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or rather, cowboys and cowgirls. We're happy to be here for another celebration of cowboy poetry, and we have some really wonderful, nationally known performers and minstrels and poets. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Price Strobridge, the current Pikes Peak Poet Laureate. And one of the sharing partners is the Pikes Peak Library District. They've made so many things happen in this community. And other sharing partners are Colorado College and UCCS, the Gazette, Poetry West. So we want to thank all those folks. Some are here that made this event happen. The behind-the-scenes workers like Dick and Jane Morton, but our events coordinator with the library, Sean Anglem, and the filming crew here, Jamie, Ralph, Erica, and Dan. So I just want to begin with a story about myself. I've got a warm place here for cowboys. I'm not a working cowboy, never was, but I was raised for 6 years in my high school years down in Kit Carson country, southeastern Colorado, Los Animas, right near the Purgatory River. And so back in 1957, I was in high school wrestling. I was just as brawny and spring. I had spring in my step and real good shape, and I just envied the cowboys in the school. You know, some of those guys would go out on the rodeo circuit, Pete Jones and some of those guys, and I'd never ridden a horse. And as it happened, my step-brother-in-law, Cotton Stringfellow, he was Roy Bennon, but he went by Cotton Stringfellow. He played around there at the roping club dances on Saturday night out by the Fort Lyon Canal. And he was between jobs. He would play a little bit of music around the dance places down there, and then he would take a job at Holly Beat Factory. And this particular time, he was for a while, had a job at the Noble Jones Ranch south of Los Animas, about 20 miles or 15, 20 miles. Big ranch, big. Morton's, they had a 19,000-acre ranch. So I don't know how many. Is that a couple of sections? Several sections? Well, I think like a Noble Jones Ranch was one of those big working ranches. Well, my brother-in-law, Cotton Stringfellow, had a job out there as a ranch hand, and Noble Jones and his family were gone for a couple of weeks, and he says, well, boys, he said to me and my brother and our buddy Medina and Mills, says, you boys want to ride a horse? Come on out there. And so I'll let you through the fence line, and you just find them. There's 4 of them out there, never been ridden. And so I had my 48 Plymouth, with split windshield, gunmetal gray, and we're just bouncing along across the cactus and everything, and we spot him. And he says, just slowly run him down the fence line, down to where the section ends, and then when the fence goes this way, you guys just pull that Plymouth in there, it's 4-door, and 2 of you get out one side and 2 the other side, and you each pick a horse. There's 4 of them. Well, I was so excited and adrenalized, and so there we were, and I jumped out there, and I was bareback, tan, and so full of vinegar, at that age, and so I just went out there, and I sprung right up, grabbed the mane, just like an Indian brave, and that horse, his name was Old Mexico, I'll learn later, that horse shot out like a bullet, we were going fast, and he was going so fast, it was just so smooth. And I thought, there's nothing to this. Wrong. He turned, and I went forever and ever. You know how it is when you have those near-death experiences. And I just I mean, it wasn't much of a life I'd had at that time. This was the culmination, you know. But I thought, oh, God, I done killed myself. And I flew and flew and flew, and it felt like I was orbiting Earth, and I looked out there, and I thought I saw Sputnik go by, you know. And then and then I landed in one of those big, tall cactus with spines like that. I couldn't breathe. You know, I knocked the wind out of myself. I was full of those cactus barbs. And so all the guys came running up to me laughing, you know. I was the only one got the ride, you know. And they were just laughing. And finally I got my breath, and they helped me back to the car. I survived to this day, you know, but that was my one and only attachment, close attachment to a horse. But I know cowboys and horses go way back, you know, in time, and it's just a history of that, and the music. I want to show you something I just found just at the stage. You know what that is? That's a picture. Can you see it? But I just found this. That's William Butler Yeats' brother Jack was an artist, and he painted the picture of it says a ballad singer, a poetic breath of other days. But really, we have our ballad singers today in the country western genre, and they're going on telling their stories. You notice they had a pocket full of poems, you know, and they would just strum. A lot of them would strum their instruments and sing the history. But we want to get right into the poetry session now because we have some big names with us. Jane Morton is going to be our first performer. She writes about her family and their 19,000-acre ranch near Fort Morgan, Colorado, that had been in Jane's family almost 100 years. And then her brother sold it after her father died. But she's been performing at gatherings throughout the West since 1998. In 2004, she was named Poet Laureate by the Cowboy Poetry website. 2007, Jane was named Female Cowboy Poet of the Year by the Academy of Western Artists. Her two books, Turning to Face the Wind and In This Land of Little Rain, have won national awards. Jane, please.
Thank you, Bryce. First, I want to read, I will be reading mine because at my age I cannot remember anymore to try to memorize them. And so it's just easier. And another thing I do, because I write them, and in the years when I tried to memorize them, I would be rereading it and think, oh, I know of a better line. And so then I would put that line in, and then I found I was just confusing myself. So now I have them on paper, and I feel a little safer. Are you hearing me? All right, okay. First, I want to do just this little short poem called Cowboy Poetry. The roundups, the brandings, the calvings are done as ranchers sell out and move on one by one. We must tell our stories so memories live on, past time when the tellers themselves are long gone. And the cowboy culture is fading out in this country, and it's too bad. The big companies, the conglomerates, are buying up the ranches, and it's a whole different story than when the ranchers themselves were living on the place. And it is changing, and it's changed a lot here in Colorado Springs since we came here about 20 years ago. And where the ranches were around the edges of town, they aren't anymore. They were sold for housing developments. And that has changed, and it's hard to find cowboy poets here now because there aren't the ranches that there used to be. Yes, we had 19,000 acres, And we did not have a crew of workers. When we had roundups, the family would all come. And when we had branding, the family would all come. And otherwise, my dad and hired man across the street, he used to own his little ranch, but he lost it when he bought a lot of cows and the price went down. And so anyway, he worked for my dad a lot of years. And they did it all. We didn't have a big crew. So anyway, I mostly write about my family and the ranch. This one is The Cows Came First. My mother said she realized with Dad, the cows came first. If cows and she both needed drinks, she knew who'd die of thirst. Though Mom competed most her life with cows for Dad's attention, the sum of times when she won out is hardly worth the mention. If Mom had planned a dinner or they'd been invited out, Dad promised he'd be in on time, but she had cause to doubt. So many different happenings had spoiled what she had planned. She came to think that fate itself might well have played a hand. It wasn't fate, it was my dad. He'd start a job too late. And thinking he had time enough, he didn't want to wait. He'd run into some problem there he hadn't counted on. And sure enough, before he knew, the daylight would be gone. By time he'd get back to the house, my mom would be irate. She knew not which excuse he'd use, but could anticipate. That ornery Angus bull I bought went through the fence today. Of course I had to get him home. He fought me all the way. I stopped to check a windmill, and the stock tank had gone dry. The cattle have to drink, you know. I'd hear my mother sigh. A calving heifer needed help, so sure, I had to stay. I promised I'd be home, I know, but couldn't get away. He had to pull a windmill or he had to pull a calf. It happened oh so many times, she almost had to laugh. And when the two got on in years, Mom was the first to go. She'd ask for flowers on her stone, but did she get them? No. Dad bought one stone for both of them, and he had it engraved. A cow and windmill took the place of flowers that she craved. When Mother said the cows came first, she knew my dad too well. Above her final resting place, that cow will always dwell. I tell you, I was really annoyed because my mother always said, Dad will take you with him shopping for a stone, but he didn't. And when I found out, I was annoyed to say the least. And the first poem I wrote was a little bitter. And I sent it to my daughter, and I said, what do you think of this? And she said, you might want to tone it down a little. So I did. But anyway, it took me a long time to get over that. And this one is connected. My father loved his cattle ranch. His life was centered there. And so connected to that earth, knew who he was and where. He knew about its history and its geology, and how his land had lain beneath the once vast inland sea. The bottom land is rich, he said, where rivers used to run. The best land in the world, he said, this soil is next to none. He knew each inch of pasture land and every cow by sight. He knew how good his corn crop looked in early morning light. He'd frozen in the winter cold on truck beds forking hay. He'd sweltered in the summer sun out looking for a stray. He'd branded cattle in the spring, cut silage in the fall. He seldom took on extra help, but tried to do it all. He'd seen the drought go on, and grass turn brittle dry. He'd seen the price of cattle drop, and his expenses sky. The weather and the price of beef were things he couldn't change. He couldn't keep a grass-fed fire from burning up his range. Beyond that, though, there wasn't much that he could not control, except the years that went too fast and age that took its toll. Dad never would have left his ranch, for he had been ground-tied, but death had other plans for him which could not be denied. If spirits get to hang around, then his is still out there. Astraddle his old buckskin horse, he's working cows somewhere. Now, last year when we did the one about the our theme was the Waldo Fire. And we thought that this year would be kind of an anniversary for that, and we'd talk about progress and that has been made and all of that. But the nature surprised us, and we had another fire, more than one really, but we had the Black Forest Fire. And I was just going to do a couple short ones about that. I'm working on a little book, a chapbook, which would have about 10 or 12 poems in it that I hope to tell the story of that fire this year. And before I do those, there's a man in the Black Forest. His name is Sam Byrne. He isn't here, is he? He said he couldn't do his poem himself. He would feel awkward about reading it. And I told him that I would read his poem. But his poem is about the Black Forest Fire. And the title is, Who Are We? Who are we? Our homes in flame, our memories lost. We watched in horror. We wept inside. The plumes of smoke that rose unfurled, they marred the sky, stared down our hope. We are the strong. Who are we? Standing with the haggard few, those men, those women who would leave behind the safe, the known, and wade into the blazing storm. We are the cheering crowds. Who are we? Our trees stand naked, charred, and black. Silence hangs like draping folds. The ashen landscape surrounds and breathes. A dirge of sweetness, eventide. We are the smoking ruin. Who are we? Songs of chickadees break through the fog. Their trills belie a land laid bare. We whisper through our morning chores. In death is yet our soaring hope. We are the survived, we are the rebuilt, we are the Black Forest. And now I have a little poem about the fire. This is still the Waldo Canyon fire, and so many things have come from that. And it's there seem to be many things about these fires and floods that inspire people with their poems. One positive came from the fire despite the damage done. Communities came together, and many worked as one. Those not affected by the fires helped out the ones who were. They gave their money, goods, and time to help healing occur. Take the sifters, for example, who sifted heaps of ash to find a treasured keepsake which was buried in the trash. When Susie's house burned to the ground, with all its furnishings. She grieved the loss, but most of all, she grieved her mother's rings. Volunteers came by to search. She showed them where to start. They sifted several hours and were ready to depart. Then one pulled something from the ash, wiped it off, and held it high. Was it, she prayed, please let it be. 2 rings, she heard him cry. Her mother's rings were platinum, which melts at higher temps. And that explains why they were found and why they were exempt from the fate of twisted metals and heat that melted gold. She held those rings close to her heart and felt new hope take hold. And that is a true story. Susie works with my daughter at Compassion. And it just made such a difference to her to have those rings. But she's selling that house. She collected her insurance money, and she's going to buy another one because she said there are just too many memories to go back to in the house that she had, even though they've rebuilt it. But she didn't want the same location. All right, I'll just do this one other one. There's so many individuals.
Flying W one?
No.
Oh, okay. That's what she's working on. Yeah, 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Well, that's another one I'm trying to finish. This one is another individual story called Losses. How must it feel to lose possessions, treasure through your past, pictures of family and friends and keepsakes you hold fast? Some losses cannot be replaced, no matter what is spent. Like Grandma's cookbook, personalized by contents, or content. I must have mixed that up when I typed it. After the mountain shadow fire, some friends moved miles away, but sent a letter to our house before Thanksgiving Day. They'd lost their cookbooks in the fire and every recipe, yet wanted their Thanksgiving meal same as it used to be. They asked us if we'd send them our relish recipe. The one that burned had come from us. They meant orange cranberry. This incident confirmed the loss of everything they had. A minor victory, to be sure, but one that made me sad. I see what the line was. I felt it up like Grandma's cookbook personalized by contents or comment. That's what it should have been.
Why don't you do you?
Yoo-hoo, okay. My mother always called yoo-hoo, so we would look her way. She did it at the sale barn one cattle auction day. Dad brought his cows to market as he did every spring. He liked to watch the auction and his cattle in the ring. Some Hereford cows were milling round and others bawling loud. The auctioneer was trying hard to stir the morning crowd. My folks were in their usual seats where they had said they'd be, and I had started toward them when my mother spotted me. She jumped up quick and called, yoo-hoo, and then she waved her hand. She'd bid on 30 Herefords with our own CU brand. The auctioneer looked toward my mom and gave a little nod. The feedlot buyer raised her bid, and I was thanking God. I didn't dare to signal her for fear they'd think I'd bid, and Mom had no idea at all of what she almost did. So needing to get down there fast, I headed for the stair. Then came another yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo that caught me unaware. I'd almost closed the distance when my mother waved once more. The auctioneer acknowledged her the way he had before. I watched the feedlot buyer as I slipped into my seat, and when the fellow didn't bid, my heart near ceased to beat. My dad sat focused on the ring, completely unaware of all the action going on right there beside his chair. From up and back there came a bid, and I could breathe again. I prayed the field had narrowed down to real cattlemen. I took Mom's hand quick as I could and held it tight in mine. I said, "How are you doing, Mom?" She said, "I'm doing fine." Now, Mom had been to auctions, and she knew what not to do. Of course, a real no-no would have been to call, "Yoo-hoo!" But Mom forgot herself that day and learned, to her chagrin, how close she came to buying back the cows that Dad brought in. When Dad caught on, he realized, as he had not before, that thanks to Mom, his cattle brought $100 more.
I better get up here. Someone's going to say, "Yoo-hoo!" Get up there. I forgot to mention before we began, this is a copy of Poetry While You Wait, and it's just a kind of a collage of the community. There's cowboy writers and 10th graders and Lockheed engineers and haiku writers, all genres of our community. So there's a copy back there, and then also my wife sent along some cowboy sketch cards, gift greeting cards or something, art cards, and just for a door prize. If you want to crinkle up your name and put it in a basket, then you might have something to take home as a souvenir. All right. Well, let's see. I just thought of the Waldo Canyon thing. How many here were here to see the movie presentation by the library, PPLD, and it was hosted by Tim Blevins, marvelous archive unit in our library. And they had photographers who had gone in there to Waldo and photographed in 3-dimension. Did anybody see that? I mean, it's just, they showed some of the, like, a box of child's marbles all melted together and silverware, some of those things. It just was shocking. But what Jane said about the community, this is a poem. There was a group poem composed while Waldo Canyon fire was raging at one of the library workshops. It was my first one, I believe, and I thought, nobody's going to be here. The fires, they're all going to be dealing with the fire. And so I'll read that. It's a short one. And by the way, there was someone started it in their 70s and worked around the library room in our workshop. You only write 2 lines, then you fold it over. The next person sees only 1 line, and then they write 2. If you want to try this, it's great. It shows how we're all in this together as a community. All right? From one small spark, a flame will build. Dazzle and terror in one sky. Darkness flashes. Blinding light darkens this crashing air, baiting the hope that someone might care about a purple river or an orange rock thought. Around the bend of memory, the robin weaves a nest without finger, needle, or pattern to follow. A cuddly, warm, safe bed to call home. Those ending lines were a 5th grade student brought it home out of the mouths of babes. So now our next performer, I had the privilege of being here last year and to listen to Roger Stone. He is known widely, an honest to goodness, born in Colorado native. Roger was raised on the family cow-calf operation on the eastern prairies of Colorado Both sets of grandparents homesteaded in Carville, Colorado area in the 1900s, early 1900s. He began singing as a small sprout and never seemed to get over that ailment. Are we happy for that? May you suffer forever. While in college, Roger would begin beating up on a guitar. He seemed to have a real knack for it, and just to keep things interesting, spent about a decade performing in local country dance band Country Partners. When the band members went to separate ways, Roger continued with his genuine attachment to music by concentrating on his true love, original cowboy western music, the old classics made famous by folks like Gene and Roy and Marty. Roger has performed at various events throughout most of the western states. Now retired from ranching, he lives in beautiful Black Forest, Colorado with his wife, Maggie Mae Sharp. Roger, let's give a big hand for that guitar.
As long as they can hear me, that's all that matters. Actually, I've moved now. I live in Blackened Forest. Oh, now you can hear me. I'm back in the saddle again. Out where a friend is a friend, where the longhorn cattle feed on the lowly Jimson weed. Back in the saddle again, riding that range once more, toting my old 44, where you sleep out every night and the only law is right. Back in the saddle again, whoopee-tie-I-O, rocking to and fro. Back in the saddle again, whoopee-tie-I-A, I go my way. Back in the saddle again. I didn't tell Price all the places I'd sang. Probably some of them I didn't want to tell about because, you know, sometimes how reputation can follow you. I didn't tell about the good things because then I might have too much to try to live up to, so just try to keep it short. I used to do this one years ago when I started, years and years ago, when it was new. It's a beautiful song, so I had to learn it, and then every time I did it to around family and stuff, well, they said, oh, that's a beautiful song, and then from there on, it's like, oh, do that one, do that one. So it's like, well, I guess I better remember and do that one. I don't know if you noticed or not, my voice is kind of thick today. I've been nursing a cold. I've nursed, you know, heifers and all that sort of stuff, but a cold's a lot easier to nurse. It just kind of takes care of itself, and you just have to put up with it. There's a place where Mother Nature got it all together. She knows just when to let wildflowers bloom. Somehow she always seems to know exactly what she's doing, and the Lord saw fit to furnish elbow room. Have you ever been down to Colorado? I spend a lot of time there in my mind. And if God doesn't live in Colorado, I'll bet that's where he spends most of his time. I'd love to be there watching early in the morning when the sun comes up and crowns the mountain king. If by chance you dare to be high up on that mountain, I'll swear that you can hear the angels sing. Have you ever been down to Colorado? I swear a lot of time there in my mind. And if God doesn't live in Colorado, I'll bet that's where he spends most of his time. I do kind of two kinds of songs. Some are cowboy songs and some are western songs. Cowboy songs are easier. They're usually at least 3 chords or less. If it has more than 3 chords, it's a western song. This must be a cowboy song because it's very simple. I was at a show one time and the guy was just playing the heck out of the guitar and kept hunting chords up there somewhere. He couldn't find them because he kept hunting. I said, try this one. It's only got 2 chords. You can get along with that. The sun is sinking in the west. The cattle go down to the stream. The redwing settles in its nest. It's time for a cowboy to sing. Purple light in the canyon, that's where I want to be with my 3 good companions, just my rifle, pony, and me. Gonna hang my sombrero on the limb of a tree, coming home, sweetheart darling, just my rifle, my pony, and me. Just my rifle, my pony, and me. Whippoorwill in the willow sings a sweet melody. Round the bend she'll be waiting for my rifle, pony, and me. No more cows to be roping, no more strays will I see. Round the bend she'll be waiting for my rifle, my pony, and me. For my rifle, my pony, and me. I don't know if you guys recognize that song. One of those great old cowboy singers, Dean Martin. Yeah. He and Rick Nelson. Yeah, good old tune. It's just one of my favorites. Notice I'm having a little better luck with the low notes than the high notes today. So, yeah, I was listening to Jane a while ago, and she's talking about all the new technology and all things that, everything's being replaced. The cowboy way of life, the music, and the cowboys. They ride in pickup trucks and 4-wheelers and stuff anymore. And the most amazing thing is now they have mechanical bulls. I read it in the paper just about a week ago. It was on the back page and not many people know. Gee, it made me feel bad when I picked it up and read, Pinto, the wonder horse, is dead. Oh, we rode the dusty trails together on the Saturday morning picture show. The dusty trails are gone now, but it hurts to hear it said, Pinto, the wonder horse, is dead. My memory goes back to when I was a little kid. We believed in everything that Pinto ever did. Whoops, I'm wilting. Didn't crank a little bit there. Okay. My memory goes back to when I was a little kid. We believed in everything that Pinto ever did. Well, our kids have a hero half as brave or half as strong. Pinto, the wonder horse, is gone. Oh, we rode the dusty trails together at the Saturday morning picture show. Those dusty trails are gone now, but it hurts to hear it said, Pinto, the wonder horse, is dead. In my childhood memories, no boys turn into men. That's the wrong line. I'll have to start over that verse again. We believed that Pinto was the fastest horse alive. If he outran the wind itself, we never were surprised. In my childhood memories, no boys grow into men, and Pinto, the wonder, rides again. Oh, we rode the dusty trails together at the Saturday morning picture show. The dusty trails are gone now, but it hurts to hear it said, Pinto, the wonder horse, is dead. Pinto, the wonder horse, is dead. That's obviously not an old cowboy song. It just, I think, kind of speaks to what we're doing here today, is trying to relive our youth, I guess, or maybe our folks' youth or something. It's bygone days. Written by a feller called the Storyteller, Tom T. Hall. I had 3 or 4 songs written down to sing today, and I looking at the clock over on the wall. I says, 3 or 4 songs ain't gonna do it. I'm gonna have to stretch this a little bit. So, when evening chores are over at a ranch house on the plains, and all I've got to do is lay around, I saddle up my pony and go riding down that trail to watch that desert sun go down. Riding down the canyon to watch the sun go down, a picture that no artist e'er could paint. White-faced cattle lowing on the mountainside, I hear a coyote whining for his mate. Cactus plants are blooming, sagebrush everywhere, granite spires are standing all around. Oh, I tell you, folks, it's heaven to go riding down that trail to watch that desert sun go down. Some of you who are familiar with that as a good old Gene Autry song, maybe you do know, or maybe you don't. It was written by Smiley Burnett, who's a sidekick of his, who was actually a pretty good musician. Another Smiley Burnett song. Well, I might have gone fishing, I got to thinking it over. The road to the river is a mighty long way. Well, it must be the season no rhyme or no reason, taking it easy, it's my lazy day. Well, never mind calling, 'cause I ain't a-comin'. Just get you on by me, stay out of my way. Well, a little deep thinking could drive me to drinking. Just taking it easy, it's my lazy day. Ain't asking no questions, ain't giving advices, ain't dating no women, ain't wanting to play. Just gonna look stupid, don't want to meet Cupid. Just taking it easy, it's my lazy day. Here's another old Gene Autry tune. Take me back to my boots and saddle. Ooh, ooh. Let me see that general store. Let me ride the range once more. Give me my boots and saddles. Let me ramble along the prairie. Ooh, ooh. Roping steers on old Bar X with my buddies Slim and Tex. Give me my boots and saddle. Got a hankering to be with the banjo on my knee, strumming a pretty western tune. There's a cow in Cherokee who's waiting there for me, waiting beneath the Texas moon. So take me back to my boots and saddle. Ooh, the nights each blazing morn from the ranch where I was born. Give me my boots and saddle. Well, I struggled through that one pretty good. I thought it'd be smart and lowered a key or so, and I got through it. But sometimes it's a wonder. Sometimes I say, well, I think this should be higher or lower, so I just move my fingers a little bit and change the key, and pretty soon I'm playing several different keys, they're all the wrong chords, and it's like, oh, geez. Where was I going with this? When it's autumn on the trail and the leaves have turned to flame, I seem to hear the breeze wandering through the trees, whispering your name. All along my lonely ride, so clearly I recall when we traveled side by side. It was autumn on the trail that you loved most of all. Do you ever think of me? Do you remember the lovely plans we made by the campfire's last gleaming embers? How I'm longing to return to those happy days we knew. Oh, my darling, how I yearn when it's autumn on the trail to be sharing it with you. If I've done one you don't like, let me know. So. An old cowboy went riding out one dark and windy day. Upon a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once the mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw, up plowing through the ragged skies and up a cloudy draw. Yippee-yi-yi, yippee-yi-yo, ghost herd in the sky. Their brands were still on fire and their hooves were made of steel. Their horns were black and shiny and their hot breath he could feel. A bolt of fear went thunder through him as they thundered through the skies, for he saw the riders coming hard and he heard their mournful cries. Yippee-yi-yi, yippee-yi-yo, the ghost riders in the sky. As the riders roped on by him, he heard one call his name. If you want to save your soul from hell or riding on our range, then cowboy, change your ways today, or with us you will ride. You tried to catch that devil's herd across these endless skies. Yippee-yi-yi, yippee-yi-yo, the ghost riders in the sky. The ghost herd in the sky. I don't know if the microphone picked up those gears grinding or not, but some of you that know the song know that I missed the third verse. It's just what? How does it start? I don't know. Well, just keep faking it. I did make a list though, just in case I run out of something to do. No, I don't have my song on there. Oh. Ride through the lonely night, ride through the day. Keep those doggies moving on their way. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all the lonely way along that Colorado Trail. Eyes like the morning stars, cheeks like a rose. Laura was a pretty girl, everybody knows. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all the lonely way along that Colorado Trail. Stars fading in the sky, day's gonna break. The sun will be shining soon, everything will wake. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all the lonely way along that Colorado Trail. Dark as the sky, back at home, rain's coming down. Wish that I was back at home, safe within her arms. Weep all ye little rains, wail, winds wail, all the lonely way along that Colorado Trail. see if I got a song in the lower key somewhere, don't I? I think I got time for one more good one here. Wildcat Kelly, looking kind of pale, was standing by the sheriff's side. And when that sheriff said, "I'm sending you to jail," Wildcat raised his head and cried. What's he said? Shoot, I lost the whole thing, didn't I? Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through that wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please. Don't fence me in, just turn me loose. Let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Wildcat Kelly, once again in town, was sitting by his sweetheart's side. And when his sweetheart said, "Come on, let's settle down," Wildcat raised his head and cried. Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through that wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please. Don't fence me in. Just turn me loose. Let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western skies. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountains rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon until I lose my senses. Can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Don't fence me in. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. That was delightful. He mentioned he was like hooked on Roy and Jean and Marty. And I thought of a backstory, how small the world really is. In the 1940s, as a little boy, I was raised out at the Myron Stratton home, and they would take us out to the Pikes Peak or Bus Rodeo at the Broadmoor in those days. And one time, the main act was Gene Autry and Champion. And there they were. I saw Champion, Gene right there. He bought us little boys and kids from the Stratton home a bag of peanuts and a cold drink. And I got to see Champion up close and personal. Now, then I got to thinking, Roy Rogers. My wife is from southern Ohio, and her aunt used to jam, loved to play and sing. Ollie was her name. And she worked in a shoe factory. I have dyslexia, food shack. You know, one of those places, make feet stuff. And she worked in the same factory with this fellow that just loved the guitar and loved singing. And you know what his name was? Leonard. You know who? Sly. Leonard Sly. And he told Ollie, he says, you know, I'm not going to stay in this town. You know, I'm going out west. And he went out to Hollywood, became Roy Rogers, and with Trigger. Yeah, well, anyway, it just shows we're all in this together somehow or another. I don't know how. Okay, but now we're going to move on to listen to Dick Morton, Dick and Jane. You figured that out? And did you have a dog named Spot and Puff. Oh, okay. I learned to read by you two. Well, anyway, I learned a lot about the Western life from these two. And they'll educate you. Dick is a Colorado native whose grandparents settled in Colorado in the 1870s. He served in the 8th Cavalry during World War II and says, "We had horses in my outfit, rode whenever we had a chance." After college, he married the rancher's daughter, Jane. His ranch education came on her dad's 19,000-acre cow-calf operation. He got broke in, fixing fence and windmills, shoveling silage, working cattle roundup and branding. Dick has been invited to perform at gatherings throughout the West and won the championship buckle as a reciter at the 2005 National Cowboy Poetry Rodeo in Utah. Dick Morton, please.
Well, thank you, and I have to admire Roger for all the songs that he knows. And Al, I hope he left one or two for you.
Hope so.
I like to recite the classics, and I guess the first one I like to do is it is a classic because the poet Rod Nichols passed away 5-10 years ago now. But before he passed away, he wrote a poem called "Yep," and I admired that poem, and I wrote Rod, and I said, "Rod, I'd sure like to use your poem." And now Rod I guess he wasn't a man of many words either. And he emailed me back and he said, "Yep." "It's been a while," the cowboy said. "Yep," said his friend. "Must be nearly 15 years. "Yep," he said again. "I guess you've been a-drifting some." "Yep," his friend replied. "I guess I've done about the same." "Yep," the old friend sighed. "Remember Shorty Winkleman?" "Yep," friend answered slow. "I hear he up and passed away." "Yep," he answered low. "Sure looks like we may have some rain." "Yep," his friend allowed. "Lord knows we can stand relief." "Yep," the other scowled. "I guess you need to head on out." "Yep," his friend intoned. "Sure glad we had a chance to chat." "Yep," the old hand droned. After supper, the cowboy said he had run into Ray. The other boys now gathered around. What'd he have to say? Well, he said it'd been a while, nearly 15 years. And he said he had drifted some working with them steers. And he said he'd knowed about Shorty's death, and that made him sad. And he figured we was in for rain, for relief, was glad. But he said he had to head on out, glad we had a chance to jaw. That old Ray is quite a talker, boys. Beats all I ever saw. How many of you people have known other guys, and maybe women too, but mostly guys, are just like that? They just don't have it's very typical. I've done that same poem in many schools. And believe it or not, the kids really get into it. After about, you say twice, you say yep twice, they're right back at you with yep. And also at a nursing home one time, Jane and I were there, and this was in Sierra Vista. It's been a long time since I've been there, I guess. Anyway, we were there, and the little old ladies and a lot of people, they were listening, and this one lady was sitting in a wheelchair, and she looked like she was kind of nodding off and head down. But after the program, we said something like, well, we hope you had a good time, and she looked up and said, yep. So I guess she was listening after all. Many of us know about the trail drives that came up through Colorado so many years ago. Of course, the trail drives started soon after the Civil War, and they started mostly in Texas. Came up this way. The Charlie Goodnight Trail came up through Walsenburg area and then up into Brush and even as far as north as Montana, these trail drives. Of course, the reason they brought the cattle here was because the trains were at these different depots now. Railroads had gotten as far west and they could ship the cattle back east, and because people back east were hungry for beef, and beef wasn't all that expensive then. Omar Barker's poem, Trail Dust, is a tribute to those early day cowboy trail riders. Each age has its heroes, men whose blood ran strong and red. Some are lusty still today, and some have long been dead. But whether in Withers or in Hale, no braver lads have been than those who rode the trails. The trails from Texas to the north, whose hoof marks now are gone, with wild stampedes to quell at night and floods to swim at dawn. Not days, but months across lone plains, they trailed the herds along. These saddle men who breathed the dust endured with laughs and song. Oh, some were drowned by crossing floods, and some the blizzards froze. And what some faced who did not die, the God of courage knows. The tracks of trailing herds today are but time-hidden scars, and trail dust long has mingled with the timeless dust of stars. Must be getting tired. Henry Herbert Nibbs, another famous Western poet, cowboy poet. He never really was a cowboy, but he loved the West and learned about horses and knew about horses and came out west and wrote about so many wonderful things. He listened to the cowboys and their stories and all. I'd like to do his poem called The Shallows of the Ford. Did you ever wait for daylight when the stars along the river floated thick and white as snowflakes in the water, deep and strange, till a whisper through the aspens made the current break and shiver as the frosty edge of morning seemed to melt and spread and change? Once I waited, almost wishing that the dawn would never find me, saw the sun roll up the ranges like the glory of the Lord, was about to wake my partner who was sleeping close behind me when I saw the man we wanted spur his pony to the ford. Saw the ripples in the shallows and the muddy streaks that followed as the pony stumbled toward me in the narrows of the bend. Saw the face I used to welcome, wild and watchful, lined and hollowed, and God knows I wished to warn him, for once I'd called him friend. But an oath had come between us. I was paid by law and order. He was outlaw, rustler, killer, so the border whisper ran. Left his word in Caliente that he had crossed the real border. Call me coward, but I hailed him. Riding close to daylight, Dan. In a hair he could have got me, but my voice, and not the warning, held his hand and kept him steady. Then he nodded, spoke my name, reined his pony round and fanned it in the bright and silent morning, back across the sunlit reel, up the trail in which he came. He had passed his word to cross it. I had passed my word to get him. We broke even, and we knew it. It was a case of give and take for old time's sake. I could have killed him from the brush. Instead, I let him ride his trail. I turned. My partner flung his arm, stretched awake. Saw me standing in the open, pulled his gun and came beside me. Asked a question with his shoulder as his left hand pointed toward muddy streaks that thinned and vanished. Not a word, but hard he eyed me as the water cleared and sparkled in the shallows of the ford. Thank you. One reason I really like Henry Hubbard Nibbs is his writing is so colorful. His words, the descriptions of his poetry is just wonderful. Other poems I've done, and I won't recite them now, but one is called The Walking Man, and there's a line in there that as the shadow of my pony walked beside him. Can you imagine that? As the shadow of my pony walked beside him. You know, that is just it's a beautiful poem. So thank you, and I hope you're having a good time and enjoying this. I'm going to leave the rest of my time for Price and the next person to follow. Because I know him.
Nope. I'm talking about myself. Nope. Because, well, he said, how many, mostly men say yep, and they won't say anything. At our house, it's just the opposite, and well, I just got to tell you, William Butler Yeats, he said for poets to sing the peasantry, and then hard-riding country gentlemen, and after porter drinkers, randy laughter. Well, a lot of people have problems in various ways. I had a brother that was helped out by the 12-step program of A&A, And one time I was at my other brother's house, my other brother Darrell, my other brother's house. He says, Price, there's a program for you. You know how Roger was helped so much by AA? There's a 12-step program. And I says, but I imbibe in my porter kind of moderately in my Guinness. I don't think I have a problem. He says, no, it's just for your other problem. It deals with compulsion. And it's a 12-step program. And well, it'll help you out. I said, well, what is it? And he says, well, it's a program like AA. It's called On and On Anonymous. On and On Anonymous. On and on and on. I blew that whole joke after that. Well, I'm getting out of here. But those stories are so delightful, and that imagery and those writers. We're going to move on to a special treat. This man calls himself the Asphalt Cowboy. And his name is Doc Mahl. Doc Mahl comes to us from Westminster, Colorado. And he's released 2 CDs of his unique West eclectic music. Such an interesting word. Genius in making up new words. And 2 more featuring his original cowboy poetry. He was first place Silver Buckle winner at the National Cowboy Poetry Rodeo in Montrose, Colorado in 2009. His newest CDs, back there, The Great Divide, been nominated for the 2013 Western Music Association Cowboy Poetry CD of the Year Award. Doc's poems and musical lyrics have been featured on the website cowboypoetry.com, and his work has also been published in the Rattle Poetry Journal. And in the words of songwriter John Chandler, listening to Doc is like having Lyle Lovett in one ear and Tommy Smothers in the other. I can hardly wait. Come on up, Doc.
Thank you, Fred. Thank Well, it's a pleasure being here with Price and Dick and Jane and Roger. What a delight. Thanks for inviting me. I'm having a ball, so hope you're enjoying your day. I guess I'm just old-fashioned to throw back into time, but when you're writing poetry, I'm thinking it should rhyme. You see, poetry these days is filled with something called free verse, just wandering lines with absent rhymes, and verses I find terse, but poetry is so much more. And rhymes its shining glory. We'll take the couplets out, about all that's left is just a story. And meter, that's important too. The pace you set when talking should kind of mark the time, just like the steps you take when walking. But rhyming, see, that's critical, 'cause rhyming holds the ear, and if the rhyme ain't perfect, well, it ought to be darn near. I guess I used to think that all the rhyming was a game, 'cause it's fun to tell a story using words that sound the same. But over time, I find that rhyming might be something more. And here's the little secret about what rhyming's really for. See, long ago, when poems began, folks couldn't read or write, but everyone could listen, memorize, and then recite. Yes, long before the printing press, when writing was a mystery, your knowledge could be passed on through a spoken oral history. And rich or poor, high or low, no matter what your station, your stories could be passed on to another generation. And if it's something memorable about your life and time, you preserve it for the future when you lock it in a rhyme. 'Cause when that story's told, long after you've passed into night, well, if the words still rhyme, they'll know they got it mostly right. So when you pass from this good earth, you might just leave your mark if rhyming words of your own voice still echo in the dark. You see, the poem is just your story. But now it's clear to me that rhyming words will guarantee you immortality. Thank you. In the heart of central Kansas, near my daddy's boyhood home, there are miles and miles of fences where the posts are made of stone. In the middle of the Great Plains, where a tree could scarce be found, men carved out limestone pillars and they sunk them in the ground. Now when the prairie winds come blowing, those posts don't seem to care as the wires strung between them dance like jump ropes in the air. And standing at attention, their shoulders never tire as they hold to either side of them those strands of old barbed wire. Those posts have stood 100 years. They'll stand 1,000 more. And when the wires rust away, folks might wonder what they're for. But lined up in formation, dressed in limestone grays and whites, they do more than form a boundary. They salute a way of life. They line a road paved with persistence. Not just a homestead, but a dream about a family's subsistence. Those fence posts paint a scene. It's a wagon, loaded down with stone. A Morgan fights the rains. A young man wet with sweat is building fence out on the plains. So, when I think I've had a hard day as I haul myself back home, well, I just remember Grandpa setting fence posts made of stone. I'm told there's a home for old cowboys on the outset of North Abilene. At the top of the stairs, he sits in a chair in the dim light of burnt kerosene. And it's there that he stares from a window at a pasture that once was a trail. It's clear when he's asked that he lives in the past, as his heart and his memories fail. But it's told that he rode with the good knights, and they say that he once rodeoed. Life's pretty full when you're mounting the bull, but now he can't even mount the commode. He's thinking I'd rather be well than ill, but I'd rather be ill than old. I'd rather be old than dead, I fear, but I would rather be dead than here. They say there's a place for old horses, not a barn, but a broken down shack. Half blind or lame, they'll offer 'em grain and a place they can walk round the back. Pacing the fence, a gray stallion with a limp and a sway in his back. How could he hold an old cowboy when he can't even carry the tack? But they say that he ran with wild mustangs under a Montana sky. Now he's haunted at last by the years that have passed. You can tell by the look in his eye. He's thinking I'd rather be well than ill, but I'd rather be ill than old. I'd rather be old than dead, I fear, but I would rather be dead than here. One night the old man climbed down the stairway and pushed his way out the front screen. Then somehow that horse appeared by the porch as if it were all in a dream. Somehow the cowboy tossed up a saddle and reached out to pull the cinch tight. Then, drawn by the ghosts of old cattle, they together rode into the night, singing I'd rather be well than ill, but I'd rather be ill than old. I'd rather be old than dead, I suppose. Dead's just a bad way to wear some fresh clothes. I'd rather be old than dead, I fear, than together they rode out of here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to do a little one that in honor of Jane Morton. Jane, thanks for inviting me down today. What a pleasure to be here and join you on the stage. And Jane had a poem in her, I think on your CD, about piecing a quilt. And I remember those words in particular, piecing a quilt, and it got my attention. So I'll do this little poem in honor of Jane, and I'll go right into a little song as well. And I'll do it in honor of my mother, who passed away this summer, and I think of her as well. There's a quilt in North Nebraska that's been sewn into the land. Rolling grass fields are the fabric, and the batting's made of sand. It's been trimmed at the horizon where it's pinned against the sky. Every stock tank is a button. Every windmill is a tie. And those strands of old barbed wire, they are the braided threads with which nimble fingers sew a pattern. Every fence post is a stitch. Each square tells a family story, sewn inside a boundary fence. That quilt chronicles the history about the trials of sustenance. Formed of fabric of those lives, that quilt will shield us from the storm. Daytime's tapestry brings beauty. Come the night, 'twill keep us warm. Pieced a broad mosaic pattern, 'tis a blend of life and line. I should think that some great spirit had a hand in the design. Oh, most folks picture the Almighty in the image of a man, but if judging by that quilt, I'd say God has a woman's hands. They say she grew up on a farm, found the muscles in her arm, found the strength, an iron will to persevere. She had a taste of being married, tasted life without a care, and when it left, she got to taste a touch of fear. She learned to do without a husband, learned what hard work was, and then she learned to raise a boy without a man. Learned getting by is pretty rough, learned getting sober's pretty tough, and though the times were rough, she learned to love the land. Lately they say she's been deciding, maybe time to give up riding, maybe time to get a house without no stairs. Says getting by is getting hard, and she could do without a garden, she could do without those worries and those cares. But she can't do without the lovin', can't do without the sun above, can't do without that ribbon in her hair. Can't do without some tea and talk, can't do without her evening walk, and she can't do without that creaking rocking chair. She can do without late hours, she can do without fresh flowers, even do without fresh food, but not fresh air. She can do without clear vision, does without a television. She can do without her church, but not her prayer. And she can't do without the lovin', can't do without the sun above, can't do without that ribbon in her hair. Can't do without some tea and talk, can't do without her evening walk, and she can't do without that creaking rocking chair. No, she can't do without that creaking rocking chair. Thank you. Sometimes I feel I maybe ought to tell of eastern Colorado and the little town where I attended school. That town had one rundown saloon, one little school, just one square room, and just one pump that rang a bell when you'd refuel. 'Twas just a little prairie town, and so the kids from all around would have to all take class together, I'm afraid. And since that county's population was not bent on procreation, we would number just a couple in each grade. Now, we had one great winter storm, and couples snuggled to stay warm. It came on New Year's Day of 1941, and in 9 months, predictably, 6 couples all birthed progeny. And in that banner litter, turns out I was one. See, Mrs. Finn gave birth to twins. The Gunther triplets then checked in, one other pair than me and Blair and Adeline. And as if joined by one long tether, we all went through school together and became the class of 1959. That little school, at least back then, had never seen a class of 10. With our enrollment, it was bursting at the seams, and so with each successive grade, a few adjustments would be made to keep us moving toward our graduation dreams. Now it was spring, my senior year. I maybe first began to fear that my straight path toward graduation might be bent. See, in my class, the other 9, unlike myself, were doing fine. So I was mired in the bottom 10%. I suppose I really did not get it, that I did not have the credit to be graduating with that close-knit pack. I still recall the teacher's voice as she explained she had no choice. Instead of graduation, I would be held back. It was no big deal. My point of view, the class of 60 numbered 2, and now with me they'd number 3, or so I'd heard. But though I hit the books again, I guess it hurt a little when I learned that I was ranked down in the bottom 3rd. I fell behind, I will admit. 'Twas not attention deficit. In fact, a growing sense of tension had begun. And in the spring, that old school marm, she came and led me by the arm. I'd have to join the class of 1961. Now, in my new class, I should tell you, there was just one other fella, and his study skills would kind of make you laugh. I figured now I had it made until I finally saw my grades, and then I learned that I was in the bottom half. It seemed that I could never win. And yes, they held me back again. I was a prisoner inside those ivory towers. I was no longer having fun, and I was pushing 21. How would I ever earn those last few credit hours? But then that teacher, I'll confess, she finally noticed my distress and maybe realized our goals were about the same. She gave me points for simple rhymes and points for showing up on time and extra credit just for writing down my name. I'd say it felt a little awkward, taking A's for washing chalkboard, taking tests with open books in front of me. That teacher tried to find a way to keep me focused on that day of graduation I was finally going to see. Now I was class of 62. And I was celebrating too. You see, I'd earned me that diploma, more or less. And since there were no babies born back there in birth year 44, 'twas I who gave the valedictory address. Thank you. With the songwriting, I hit a dry spell. Hadn't written one for quite a while and heard someone say, just write about things you really know. So I wrote about used clothing. Good enough. These boots are good enough. There's a little breakdown in the leather from spending time out in the weather, but there's a lot of wear left in the soles. I'd say that they're my favorite pair, and they're not showing holes. These boots are good enough. Good enough. This hat, it's good enough. There's just a little stain in there around the brim. It handles rain and sun and stays on in the wind. I'd say it's still okay to wear to town. It's broken in for sure, but it's not broken down. This hat is good enough. Good enough. If I'm forced to choose between old and new, you'll find me on the side of tried and true. And I'm hoping that I'm still the man that you can't live without, and you like that I'm worn in but not worn out. Good enough. This life, it's good enough. I'd like to stay ahead someday instead of only wishing, but I find time to play with the kids. Some days I go fishing. We've got a roof over our heads. We've got heat and we're well fed. Some men my age, they yearn for something new. I only need to know that I can stay with you and that I'm good enough. Good enough by you. I am good enough. Good enough by you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're having a lot of fun today. I hope you're having some fun too. Old Buffalo Bill, he was a businessman. knowed how to wheel and deal, and seemed to know just when a cowboy might be desperate for a meal. You see, I'd spent the year with Smitty Krebs. We drove the Chisholm Trail. We started out with about 2,000 head and found a way to fail. Oh, we lost some cattle to the loco weed, some to the desert sun. We lost some cattle when the river swelled once crossing had begun, and we lost cattle to Comanche raids when passing through their lands, and lost some cattle in a stampede when we lost a couple hands. But now some man named William Cody traded whiskey for our ear, and then he tried to tell us why we ought to sign up for a year. He'd heard that Smith could shoot a rifle ball right through a 2-inch hoop or tag a tin can tossed into the air. And I could throw a loop. He'd maybe heard that racing bareback was a trick that I could do, and Bill had probably heard that both of us were now without a crew. It seems that Anderson done broke his leg, and Ace had taken ill, and turns out Paco'd run off with a girl, and Lefty'd had his fill. Well, sir, why not, says I to Smitty, and his eyes met up with mine. Before you knowed it, seems the both of us had signed the dotted line. We'd always figured pushing cattle was the only job we'd know, but now we'd signed to be performers in the traveling Wild West show. We packed a bag and caught a train and met up with the troop in time. We stowed our gear and shook some hands and stepped into the chorus line. 2 hungry men. We couldn't believe our newfound serendipity. We'd gone from being unemployed to learning choreography. And every morning Bill would tell the troop to wash up and to groom, and we would spend each night in feather beds, just 2 men to a room. And Bill provided the finest courses and the finest rope, and he had all of us learn manners, and he made us all use soap. Oh, if our 2 cups weren't overflowing, well, they sure enough were full. We rode alongside Annie Oakley and performed with Sitting Bull. With our rehearsals soon behind us, we prepared for opening night, and when the curtain rose, old Buffalo stepped out into the light. He wore a silver-studded hatband on a hat that said, "Take note." He dressed in palomino trousers and a matching leather coat with 12-inch fringe. You see, his jacket and his face both wore a beard, and we could tell he'd made his entrance when the audience all cheered. Then we'd parade around the arena with a dozen longhorn cattle, and we'd show off all our tricks and reenact a famous battle. Sitting Bull and 7 braves would then appear in full headdress. Turns out Bill treated all those Indians better than we did out west. And then before the final curtain, as we played the grand finale, Buffalo Bill be packing up and he'd be counting up the tally. I remember every paycheck would be in my hand on time, and I remember Bill's accounting 'cause 'twas never short a dime, and I remember every closing as we packed our things to go, old Bill would shake the hand of every man and tell each one, "Good show." We traveled up and down the coast for all the Easterners to see. We played for Southern debutantes and Northern aristocracy. Bill took that show to London town, and there I saw a ballet dance. And we all got to meet an emperor outside of Paris, France. Turns out old Smitty seemed to like that life. He stayed on by and by, but I was longing for the comfort of a 1,000,000-acre sky. See, I was longing for the fantasy that times would never change, and I was pining for the romance of the West and open range. And so I rode back to Laredo, to the only life I knew. And then in time, got me a little spread and got me my own crew. Now, when they're out there working cattle, well, their lives are on the line, and of the boss man, all they ask is that the paycheck comes on time. It's just a paycheck and a partnership. That's all they're asking for. But after working for old Bill, I try to give him something more. I always do my best at planning so as we don't depend on luck. And for the end of the day, I always pack some whiskey in the chuck. I've learned that horses and men need resting, for the work extracts its toll. I've learned to appreciate the red man's plight and speak in Espanol. I'll always add to the remuda when a good horse is for sale. I've learned to allow a second chance or maybe help a man make bail. And I'll admit to every wrangler all the things that I don't know. And at the end of the day, I shake their hands and tell each one, "Good show." I once was asked, why does the talent always want to work for you? What's in your little bag of secrets? Where'd you learn to run a crew? Well, I don't try to be deceptive, but I suppose they'll never know, because I just tell them that I learned it from the bearded buffalo. Thank you. Well, you know, we go to the Western shows around the Western U.S., and we have a lot of fun, and Dick and Jane have managed to cross paths with you at many of those, and Roger, look forward to doing that with you as well. And we do a lot of songs about raising cattle, raising beef. Here's one about eating beef. The cook, he's been to chef school. Imagine all he's learned. He says the steak is blackened. I say the steak is burned. I've got the blackened blues. I've got the blackened blues. Maybe it's haute cuisine in New Orleans, but not in Baton Rouge. I got the blackened blues. Well, he grills it till it stiffens, and it's kind of hard to chew. And then he calls it blackened, tastes something like a shoe. I've got the blackened blues. I've got the blackened blues. Some say that it's gourmet, I call it beef fillet abuse. I've got the blackened blues. Well, with oil and fancy spices, they can get the meat to char. But I just want a little salt and some A1 from the jar. Some people call it charbroiled, some people say well done. But I'll take my steak so rare that it could still get up and run. Now I'll try to be polite, my friends, I don't mean to seem so crude. But I'd rather eat it raw than eat it over barbecued. I've got the blackened blues. I've got the blackened blues. 1 extra minute on the flame is a minute I can't use. I've got the blackened blues. So don't make me steak that's blackened. I don't even like it brown. Like I said, I like it red, whether my beef's in slabs or ground. I've got the blackened blues. I've got the blackened blues. 1 extra minute on the flame is a minute I can't use. I've got the blackened blues. So make me steak that's black. Oh, I sang that already.
It's contagious.
It is contagious, isn't it? I was going to finish this song. I'm asking, please turn down the heat. I've never cared for blackened meat. I do not care for blackened fish. I'll never choose a blackened dish. I do not like blackened eggs or blackened ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am. Don't even serve me blackened spam. I've got the, can't imagine, blackened rack of lamb blues. I can't resist doing one I didn't plan on doing. Reciting poetry's not as dangerous as pushing cattle herds, but you're like looking mighty scared when one of us forgets the words. You see, each poem is like a pickup truck. The poet's here to drive, and you might find it can be frightening when you're watching it done live. Because that poet's racing down the road, it seems he's got the feel, and then one little lapse of memory, and poof, no steering wheel. Each poem is like a racing car, and you're like NASCAR fans. You know the chance to see a wreck, that's what fills seats there in the stands. And this gathering's like a rodeo's full day from start at morn. Folks, it would be a boring show if every rider made the horn. Still, some folks feel that they're entitled to perfection, won't accept a little stumble or a big mid-course correction. So if a gruesome poetry wreck is something you don't care to see, then I'd say take your ticket money, friends, and buy the damn CD. Let me finish it off with, I'll do one little one to finish it off. Thanks for having me here, Dick, Jane, Roger, it's good to see you. Bryce, thanks for joining us. Thanks for introducing us. Was that Dan on the sound? Thanks, Dan. Lived for many years in Boulder, Colorado. It's a little unnerving when you're in the cattle business. About 1/3 of every person walking down the street is a vegetarian. You know this song, but you may have never heard these words. Happy trail mix to you. I'm eating meat again. Happy trail mix to you. I'm no longer vegetarian. My friends, they seem to think that I'm a deadbeat when I admit I've got a craving for some red meat. Happy trail mix to you. I'm eating meat again. Happy trail mix to you. I'm eating meat again. No more chopsticks tofu. No more eggplant julienne. The grazing life was sometimes God-forsaken. Just serve me lettuce, toast, tomato, and some bacon. Happy trail mix to you. I'm eating meat again. All that carrot juice was good for my skin turgor, but my liver seemed to cry out for a burger. A happy trail mix to you. I'm eating meat again. Happy trail mix to you. We're eating meat again. Happy cake mix to you. No more quiche, we're finally eating like men. I started falling off the wagon at the sushi bar, but now I order French fries and some steak tartare. Happy trail mix to you. We're eating meat again. We're eating meat when we eat again. Thank you so much. I'm Doc Mahl. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.